Good day, everyone. Today we are going to talk about accommodations and modifications in science for learners with orthopedic impairment. Students requiring special services are not always cognitively impaired. Sometimes students may require modifications based on their physical abilities, particularly those classified with an orthopedic impairment. According to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, an orthopedic impairment is defined as a severe orthopedic impairment that adversely affects a child's educational performance. The term includes impairments caused by congenital anomaly, impairments caused by disease, for example, poliomyelitis, bone tuberculosis, and impairments from other causes such as cerebral palsy, amputations, and fractures or burns that cause contractures. So, orthopedic impairments can be classified as belonging to one of three different categories. We have first, neuromotor impairments, second, degenerative diseases, and lastly, musculoskeletal disorders. Common examples of conditions according to each category include the following. For neuromotor impairments, we have spina bifida, cerebral palsy, spinal cord injuries. For degenerative diseases, we have muscular dystrophy, spinal, muscular, and atrophy. For the third type, which is the musculoskeletal disorders, we could have clubfoot, missing deformed limbs, or scoliosis. So the challenges in having students with orthopedic impairment, um, this type of impairment may interfere with the student's ability to perform in an educational environment in order to qualify for special services. This disability may interfere with the student's ability to walk, write, or perform other physical tasks in the classroom and laboratory setting. It might also affect the student's ability to communicate with others, hindering their ability to respond to questions orally. Furthermore, they might also have additional disabilities that can affect their educational performance, including mental retardation, learning disabilities, perceptual problems, distractibility, disorganization, visual motor deficits, restlessness, and visual abnormalities. These various conditions all serve to affect the student's coordination and mobility as well as their ability to communicate, learn, and adjust. While orthopedic impairments may also affect the student's endurance in performing various tasks as they might tire more easily. The instructor needs to meet with the case manager of the student and with the parents or guardians of the student in order to best prepare for meeting the needs of the student. Students with orthopedic impairments will likely have a variety of needs, influenced by the type of limitations they experience with their disability. Heller and Swinhart Jones in 2003 developed the following model, which depicts the impact of orthopedic impairments on educational performance. As what you can see in a picture here, no, from having the three types of orthopedic impairment, it could provide different limitations to students, such as motor limitations, restricted communication, fatigue and endurance limitations, health factors, experiential deficits and concept development problems, neurocognitive impairments, and interactional effects of additional disabilities. So these can also affect their behavioral, emotional aspects such as their motivation, self-concept and self-esteem, social competence, and among other else. So considering these challenges, as teachers, we have to assess them. What limitations do we have in our student with orthopedic impairment? After analyzing, we can then start to come up with the right accommodations and modifications the student needs. So also we have three basic principles when accommodating students with orthopedic impairment. So what are these three basic principles? First is to use others as resources. Second is be flexible in your planning. And the third one is be ingenious and creative. So as a teacher, these three considerations will help us know how to accommodate and provide modifications for our students. Students with orthopedic impairments often have a large support team assigned to work with them to ensure that they are receiving appropriate educational services. For example, students might be given assistance from special education teachers, an occupational or physical therapist, or a speech and language pathologist. If the severity of the impairment is far less or temporary, The assistance may be from an adaptive physical education teacher. So involve the various members of the support team to gain clear idea of what educational services strategies will be appropriate for the student. The instructor should also be made aware of specific indicators of student health problems and have the ability to respond appropriately should an emergency situation arise. So now let us go over our accommodations and modifications. First is the use of assistive technology. Students with orthopedic impairments may have assistive technologies that allow them to communicate, read, record notes, or physically move around the room. Conversing with the members of the student support system who are familiar with these technologies can help the instructor learn how these technologies can be incorporated into instruction. Instructors should work closely with special education teachers in order to provide appropriate modifications to tasks, quizzes, and other assignments. For example, a student might be better able to respond to questions orally rather than writing or using assistive technology, or the number of questions on a test might be reduced if the student tires easily. As what you can see here, we have pictures, examples of assistive technology for students with orthopedic impairment. We can use these types of computers where they can easily navigate on their lessons, instructions about the lesson. They also have different augmentative communication technologies, and they also have technologies to help them in their movements or mobility. The second one is the visual presentations. So visual presentations such as structured graphic organizers, which limit the amount of visual processing or physical writing, may also be useful modifications for students with orthopedic impairments. Since these students might also be affected by mental retardation and learning disabilities that might affect their ability to learn, students with orthopedic impairments may have modified expectations for knowledge and skills they are expected to acquire. For example, a student may exempt from taking a class if it is determined that a particular subject might be too abstract for them to grasp. It would be wise for the instructor to meet with the special education teacher to determine unit content appropriate for the student's abilities. So as an educator, it is important to not bombard the student with too much information about the lesson, because sometimes students with orthopedic impairment go with other learning disabilities and other mental difficulties. So with that, it is important for special educators to consider providing them visual presentations to help them not feel bombarded. They will not tire, considering that they tire easily. They will not be stressed or too pressured with what they are seeing. As special education teachers, it will help them if we minimize or do limitations on what we feed, with the instruction that we feed to them. So the third one that we should consider is the learning environment. So in addition to determining appropriate instructional strategies and curricular expectations, it is vital that the instructor evaluate the physical classroom environment when planning to work with students with orthopedic impairments. Consideration should be given to seating. So for example, desk with attached chairs versus tables. We also have floor traction, lighting, board visibility, width of aisles, work surface accessibility, location of classroom supplies, and location of the student in the classroom. Creating a physical environment that allows a student to easily interact with their peers is a first step toward creating a welcoming, safe space for learning to occur. So when you are expecting for a child with orthopedic impairment in the class, consider the accessibility of the classroom. If the child is in a wheelchair, the class should be accessible by wheelchair. Check if the flooring is adequate for child's needs. Also check door width, stairs or thresholds, and the other doorknobs. Toilet accessibility is another important issue that needs to be considered. If your classroom is not suitable, you will need to consider renovation or shifting to a different classroom. The fourth one is assess physical layout of science laboratories that students need to use. So student accessibility is, as what I've mentioned earlier with the classroom environment, the same thing is important for science laboratories. We should provide accessibility because student accessibility is likely to be the biggest concern for instructors planning to meet the needs of students with orthopedic impairments in the laboratory setting. Instructors will need to assess the physical layout of their own particular lab setting to determine what areas need to be addressed when instructing a student with orthopedic impairments. Special education teachers should consider the types of modifications that might be made to existing laboratory environments or equipment in order to make it accessible for students with orthopedic impairments. The instructor needs to explain the activities associated with working in the laboratory setting to the learner's case manager, paraprofessional, and parents before having the learner engage in such activities in order to decide which activities are appropriate and safe for the learner. So it is important to consider these things, and in this part also I believe that there are also tools and like equipments for students with orthopedic impairment that's modified, such as their glassware, the gloves and everything that they are to work on to make sure of their safety. Fifth one is the special furniture. So a child in a wheelchair or a child with a spinal problem may require some special chair or table. So it is important to discuss these issues with the parents. If the child is finding it difficult to sit on the regular classroom chair, it will be worth considering getting a special chair for the classroom. The child will be spending a lot of his time every day in the classroom. Moreover, if a child is not seated comfortably, learning and writing can be very difficult. So in learning science, as a teacher in a classroom, it is important to consider also their sitting or furnitures they're using, the chairs or tables, so that we are able to ensure that they are comfortable and that their learning space is convenient for them. Because if they're having difficulties with their positions, cases might be they're not able to focus when the teacher is teaching the lesson, or they're able to properly take note of the lessons that they want to take note. So this varies from case to case. The number 6 is modified writing aids. A child with a disability in their upper limb may benefit from writing aids. Writing aids include writing boards, special paper, pencil grips, and special pencil holders. Children with coordination problems may also benefit from a weighted vest. As a teacher, you can help by emphasizing on learning the concept and giving the child a little extra time to write, since students with orthopedic impairment may have difficulties in writing. Modifications range from providing more time to complete tasks to using a computer with alternate input for assignments. Although the type and extent of modifications greatly vary across students with orthopedic impairments, students often need alterations in one or several major categories. A. Environmental arrangement modifications. So it is important for us to consider these. Example of this is the scheduled rest breaks, preferential seating, materials specially positioned or stabilized. Letter B is the instructional modifications. For example of the instructional modifications is the study outlines, extra repetition, organization, extra set of books. Letter C is the modifications and assistive technology in science subject. Example is the on-screen keyboard with trackball for writing. Chemistry, laboratory glassware modified with handles, and among many others. Letter D is a class participation modifications. Example with this is extra time to respond, alternate response mode, augmentative communication. So it is also important for the teacher to give enough time, enough materials or avenue for students to be able to participate in the class. And we also have letter E, modifications for assignments and tests. Examples are extended time, shorter test segments, alternate responding, computer use, alternative input, alternate test format. And lastly, which are other modifications such as assistance in moving chair up to desk, use of mechanical feeding device, assistance with toileting, and lastly is the assistance with mobility. Teachers licensed to teach students with orthopedic impairments need to be able to assess, design, and implement these types of modifications and evaluate their successfulness. It is also important to have good teaming and collaboration skills to effectively work with other teachers and related service staff as modifications are selected and put in place. So I hope that you have learned something in our lesson for today. Thank you and God bless you always.